Just 4 games on tonight's slate for daily fantasy baseball. And despite that, I still think there are pretty good options both for pitching and for stacking. They're not going to be as robust as usual, obviously, with just 8 total pitchers available for tonight. But I do still think it's a slate that I'd feel good playing on most nights. Now, that does not mean I'm going to get to 3 pitchers to recommend, but it does say to me the 2 I'm recommending, I do feel pretty good about. We'll break down who those guys are, why I like them, how to rank them, and much more to get you ready for Thursday night. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network. I am Jim Sonis. I am a digital media managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to break down tonight's 4-game main slate with lock set for 6:40 p.m. Eastern. Again, 6:40 p.m. Eastern is lock for today. I want to give a big thank you to Tom Vecchio for filling in for me yesterday. I was out due to COVID, but back for today. Still feeling a bit under the weather, so apologies if it sounds a bit odd, but recovering pretty well. So happy to be back with you once again for today to talk about, again, pretty decent 4-game slate. Check out Tom on Twitter at DFS_Tom to thank him for filling in for me yesterday and last week as well. As far as weather for today, there is a chance of rain in Philadelphia for the Phillies and the Nationals. They'll be, I think, able to play through it, I would guess, but check back on that one later. Boston's rain odds are higher for the Red Sox and the Royals. There is at least some risk there of a postponement, so check back on that one as well. I'd say Red Sox and Royals is kind of the key game to monitor for tonight. It's not a huge priority. It is for pitching a bit, but for stacking, not as high on my list. So just check them back on that one later on to make sure there won't be interruptions to disrupt our potential pitcher for tonight. We'll talk about who that is and much more here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating. And as always, the video versions of the show do go up on the FanDuel YouTube page and over on FanDuel TV Plus as well. Speaking of FanDuel Research, the link for this week's FanDuel Research free roll is now available at FanDuel.com/research. It revolves around Saturday's main slate for the English Premier League as they return to the pitch. Lock is at 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, running these free rolls every week through the end of NFL season to celebrate their transition to FanDuel Research and to thank all the loyal Number Fire users. To get the link and to enter, go to FanDuel.com/research and look for the story on the front page. Eligibility restrictions apply. We'll be talking about the EPL Match Week 1 with Austin Cass uncovering the spread later on today. Pitching preview for this Thursday main slate. Only 3 guys have salaries above $8,000. Those are Clayton Kershaw at $10,700 with Aaron Nola at $10,000 flat. James Paxton is $97,000. Now, Kershaw's coming off the IL. And that's going to matter a lot when it comes to deciding whether we can actually get to a third pitcher for tonight. We'll talk about him later, though. Let's focus here on Nola and Paxton, because to me, I think they're the top 2 guys and kind of the only 2 guys I want to use. And which guy you prefer depends on the game type. If you want safety for a cash game, I prefer Nola. If you want upside, I'd go with James Paxton. So let's talk through Paxton first, because I assume you all are more likely to be playing tournaments and cash games, which I get. So totally understandable there. They're more fun. So let's talk through Paxton first. He doesn't deal with the rain in Boston. So again, check back on that later. We'll go through Nola in a second. Paxton facing the Royals, not a great offense against lefties with a 92 WRC plus and a 145 ISO. They've also got pretty poor plate discipline stats. And that means not a lot of walks, not a great strikeout rate. And that leads to few drawn out plate appearances where they're having, 6-7 pitches per plate appearance. That's a good thing for Paxton because you never really know how long he'll last. And that's why he's the upside play, but not the floor play. The upside should be there, though, because Paxton has a 27% strikeout rate this year. He has a 3.73 skill interactive ERA. His hard hit rate is about average, a little bit above it at 39%. It's fine enough when the plate discipline numbers are as good as they are. Paxton hasn't had many big games recently, but he also hasn't faced many high strikeout teams. Now, the Royals are not that either, but they are a bit above average. So Paxton has a good enough ceiling where I'd rank him first for tourneys, slightly above Nola. As for Nola, it's not like he has zero upside. It's just not as much as Paxton has. And that's due to his matchup. Now, that may sound weird because he faced the Nationals, who just got no hit last night, but they do a good job of avoiding strikeouts. In that game last night, Michael Lorenzen, pitching in his Vans, threw 124 pitches and had just 5 strikeouts. So obviously an amazing performance. Kudos to him. That's awesome. but that's kind of emblematic of what the Nationals do. They have just a 20% strikeout rate against righties this year, which is the lowest number on the slate. So that's why Paxton, I think, despite the fact the Nats got no hit last night, I think the Paxton is better upside than Nola, despite the fact Nola is facing them. But Nola does have plenty of other stuff in his favor, including other parts of the matchup, because the Nationals have a WRC plus of 86 against righties with a 134 ISO with a 6% walk rate. So similar to the Royals, they are not having drawn out plate appearances. Nola has started to throw his curveball more again recently. He has a 28% strikeout rate and 13 starts doing that, so slightly above Paxton. His skill interactive ERA is a bit better at 3.56, and he has had some big gains in that time too. He had 12 strikeouts twice in that span, but both those games came against teams that strike out more than the Nationals do. So I don't want to overrate those two blowups too much. The efficiency for Nola is very nice, and it's why I actually have Nola projected for slightly more strikeouts than Paxton. I just believe that the best case scenario, like the 90th, 100th percentile outcome, favors James Paxton. Now, we might not need that for tonight, so that'd be a case for using Nola in tournament or in cash games or in tournaments as well. But I do still think that if you're looking for like the most raw upside, it's Paxton 1, Nola 2, but really you can kind of put them however you want. Like I mentioned before, I honestly can't talk myself into a third pitcher on this slate. Kershaw would be my next ranked, but I'm not going to use him due to the limitations we'll discuss in things to watch. You could maybe go Patrick Corbin because of pitch count. You could maybe go Zach Littell, but I don't know how stretched out Littell is. So I'm honestly just going to stick to those two for today. There's not much point in recommending or talking about someone I can't in good faith recommend. So to me, it really does revolve around just Nola and Paxton for tonight, depending on your game type. Well, again, we'll talk about Kershaw later on. First, let's dive into the stacks. And for stacks, I think the Dodgers and Rays stand out from the pack tonight. I like the Dodgers a bit more, so let's start with them first, and then we'll dig into the Rays later on. The Dodgers are facing Ty Blach. Blach is transitioning from the bullpen into the rotation, and he wasn't lighting it up as a reliever. He also didn't thrive as a starter in AAA before getting called back up. So it's hard to expect Blach to really beast out as a starter when that's the case. He has made 3 starts so far, and 2 of them have been very good, while 1 has been bad. But those have been based on the matchups where he shut down the Marlins and the Athletics, and he struggled against the Cardinals. The Dodgers are much more like the Cardinals than they are like the A's. They have a 118 in WRC plus against lefties with a 218 ISO and a 43% fly ball rate. And Blach has also let up a 49% R hit rate across those 3 starts. So I think he could be in some trouble here facing off against this Dodgers lineup. And it does make the Dodgers standouts on this short slate. Now, I talked a couple weeks ago about being skeptical of Kike Hernandez and his return to the Dodgers. I'm less so now, honestly. He's playing entire games. He's not striking out at all, not leaving for pinch hitters. And his batted ball stats are much better with the Dodgers than they were with the Red Sox. It was also Kike Hernandez bobblehead night last night in Boston. Maybe the narrative carries over to the next day. Who can say? I'll get the narrative committee to give a full ruling on that one. And I would still rank Kike behind Chris Taylor and Ahmed Rosario among the righties, but I am much more receptive to Hernandez now than I was before. So having 3 value plays in the Dodgers who are very, very viable makes it a lot easier to stack them, even while going to Nola and Paxton as our pitchers for today. As for the Rays, are at home tonight, and typically that's a big downgrade for them because it's cooler there with the roof around 70 degrees. And when you've got games in the 90s, that's tough. But there are no warm games on tonight's slate, so that doesn't really matter at all. So I think the Rays make a lot of sense. They're facing Matthew Liberatore, and I actually used Liberatore when he first came up from AAA. The velocity was good. He looked good, but the velocity has come down quite a bit since that start. It's down specifically over his past 7 starts, and then the peripherals have sunk in that time as well. Across those 7 starts, he has a 5.99 skill interactive ERA with an 11% strikeout rate. His hard hit rate allowed is 46%, and Liberatore has an even worse ERA at 7.76. He's had some tough matchups in there for sure, but the Rays are that as well with a 123 WRC plus against lefties and a 196 ISO. So I wanted to buy into Liberatore earlier on when he first came up, but I think based on what we've seen here recently, over a large enough sample of 7 starts, we can feel okay going away from that and stacking against him here for tonight. With it being a lefty, we should get Curtis Mead in the lineup for the Rays. Mead has started a couple games, and he did play the full game both times. Didn't hit for a ton of power down in AAA, but his hard hit rate there was 42%, and he had really good plate discipline numbers. His salary is $2,100, so if the salary were higher, I could be a bit more nitpicky with Mead not showing a ton of power in AAA, but his salary is very, very low, so I'm not going to be picky. I expect him to play the entire game, get him at probably 6th, 7th, somewhere in there for $2,100 in this lineup. That makes a lot of sense to me. So Curtis Mead, another good value play. Again, making it easier to get to Nolan Paxton and still have your cake and eat it too with guys like Mookie Betts. Next up for me in stacks would be the Phillies. They're facing Patrick Corbin, and Corbin has had his good starts and his bad ones since the struggles at the start of the year. But the underlying numbers overall say we can stack against him with Philadelphia. Corbin has made 13 starts since he re-upped his four-seam fastball usage. His ERA is 5.45 despite some really nice outings. His skill interactive ERA nearly matches that at 5.03. He has a low strikeout rate and a 44% hard hit rate allowed. Corbin is still getting some ground balls, and that may be part of why the Phillies are lower for me than the other two teams, but I also like the other offenses more. And Corbin has a higher strikeout rate than both Block and Lee Meritor. So the Phillies are a solid stack, but I definitely think they're third on this list for me tonight. It is a solid third, though, and one I would not feel bad using at all. Now, I do want to dig into Bryce Harper here quickly. I know it's a lefty he's facing, but Harper traditionally is always a lefty as well, and I do think he's starting to get his groove back a bit. His issue for this year has been power, but since the All-Star break, his ISO is 190. It's 135 for the full season, so much better in the second half. His hard hit rate is 49% in that time with a 14% barrel rate. And the fly ball rate recently, about the past week or so, has really started to creep back up again. So Harper's always a lefty as well, facing lefty here. I think now is a great time to buy into him here at $3,400. So among the buy low candidates here on the Phillies between Harper and Turner, much more inclined to go Harper at $3,400 because I do think we've seen some signs of some legit turnaround there. Not opposed Turner, but I think Harper, my preferred guy between those two. Things to watch for tonight. A couple things are working against Clayton Kershaw here, and that's why I couldn't quite get to him as a pitcher. The first thing is pitch count because he went 60 in a simulated game over the weekend. So he could be around 70 or 75, which is not a ton. And we know they're willing to be conservative with Kershaw. But Dave Roberts also said that his shoulder is not perfect yet, which is concerning. Like, why you starting him if that's not the case? So the matchup for Kershaw is unreal. And Kershaw has pitched very well when healthy this year, but I just don't think I can justify putting him in a lineup with all these things converging here. I'd be totally fine stacking the Red Sox. They'll be facing Alec Marsh as the bulk reliever behind an opener tonight. Marsh is better than his results thus far with a 6.75 ERA, but, again, I think he's better than that. He can get some strikeouts, does walk a lot of guys, and have a ton of balls in play. That's why the Red Sox aren't higher in the stacking list for me, but there's no real reason to avoid them here. The final pitcher we have not yet discussed is Zach Littell. He's facing the Cardinals, who are a low strikeout offense, and he's also a low strikeout pitcher with not a robust pitch count. That's why I can't get him as a pitcher, even as a pivot from those top two guys. But Littell's pitched pretty well, both in the rotation and as a reliever this year. I'd rather stack against him than use him as a pitcher, but I'm pretty okay with doing neither, if at all possible, for today. He's kind of the one true, neutral purgatory guy who I think is sitting in that between zone for tonight. Let's finish up here with some dinger calls for today. The boring one, Mookie Betts has insane numbers against lefties this year. I know he's a small guy, but look up his power numbers against lefties. They are absolutely bananas. He's facing a lefty for tonight. I got to do it. So Mookie Betts, the boring home run call for today. And the fun one, I mentioned Curtis Mead didn't have great power numbers in AAA, but again, he was making really hard contact, probably going to bat at a good spot in the order. Good matchup for him too. So why not? Let's roll with it here. Let's make Mookie Betts and Curtis Mead our home run calls for today. That's all we got here for today on the Solo Shot. We'll be back with you once again tomorrow, breaking down Friday's main slate, which should be a pretty big one. So be sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts to get that right as it goes live. And check this out over on FanDuel's YouTube page and over at FanDuel TV Plus. If you got any questions for me, I'm on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. I want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups for tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.